Admiral Keffer stood before the massive crystal window of his flagship, watching the stars drift past like tiny diamonds scattered across black silk. His tall, blue-skinned form cast long shadows in the dim light of the command bridge. Behind him, dozens of officers worked quietly at their stations, their crystal consoles glowing with soft purple light. The bridge was silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's energy core. This was how things had always been aboard hegemony vessels. Order, control, perfect discipline. For 3,000 years, the Andorian hegemony had ruled the galaxy this way, and Kethver intended to keep it that way for 3,000 more. His ship, the Eternal Glory, was one of 12 dreadnoughts in the Third Fleet. Each vessel stretched over 2 kilometers in length, built from living crystal that could heal itself when damaged. The hulls shimmered with energy fields that could turn solid matter into dust with a single pulse. These ships had never known defeat. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and crushed every species that dared to resist. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. Kethver turned to see his communications officer, a younger Andorian with nervous eyes. "We are receiving the weekly reports from the Outer Rim territories." Kethver nodded slowly. The Outer Rim was the edge of known space, where small colonies and mining operations worked to feed the hegemony's endless hunger for resources. It was boring work, watching over primitive species that knew their place in the galaxy's natural order. The Andorians ruled from the top, as was their right. They had evolved on a world of pure crystal and energy, developing technology that seemed like magic to lesser species. Below them came the Zephyrians, insect-like creatures with 4 arms and razor-sharp claws. They served as the hegemony's enforcers, keeping order on conquered worlds with brutal efficiency. The Nereidans came next, blue-skinned water-dwellers who managed the galaxy's economic networks. Their vast underwater cities processed trade routes and resource distribution across 10,000 star systems. They were content with their role, knowing that cooperation brought wealth and comfort. Below these 3 great species came dozens of lesser races. Some were useful for manual labor on dangerous worlds. Others served as soldiers in the hegemony's endless expansion. A few provided entertainment or specialized skills. All knew their place. All understood that resistance meant extinction. The system had worked perfectly for millennia. The galaxy was at peace under Andorian rule. Wars were small affairs, quickly crushed by superior technology and overwhelming force. Most new species surrendered after seeing a single demonstration of hegemony power. "What news from the Rim?" Kethver asked, settling into his command chair. The seat molded itself to his body. Reading his biorhythms and adjusting the ship's environmental systems accordingly, the communications officer hesitated. "Sir, there are unusual reports from Sector 7, Colonial Administrator's report contact with an unknown species." Kethver raised one elegant eyebrow. Unknown species were rare these days. The hegemony's scout fleets had mapped most of the galaxy. Any species advanced enough for space travel had either joined the hegemony willingly or been conquered centuries ago. "Show me the data," he commanded. The main display screen flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional map of Sector 7. Red dots marked the locations of reported contact. Kethver frowned as he studied the pattern. The contacts were scattered across nearly 20 star systems, all in what the hegemony classified as dead space. "These coordinates are all listed as uninhabitable worlds," he said. "High radiation, extreme gravity, toxic atmospheres. No intelligent species would choose to colonize such places." "That is what makes this so strange, sir," the officer replied. The reports describe settlements and orbital platforms around these hostile worlds. The creatures appear to prefer environments that would kill most known species within hours. Kethver stood and walked closer to the display. The pattern was indeed unusual. Most species sought out garden worlds with comfortable gravity and breathable atmospheres. Even the hardy Zephyrians avoided planets with gravity above 2 standard units. "What do we know about their technology?" he asked. Another officer, this one from the intelligence section, stepped forward. "Very primitive, sir. Our scouts report vessels constructed from crude metals and chemical propulsion systems. No evidence of energy manipulation or crystal technology. They appear to be early-stage industrial, possibly having achieved spaceflight only recently. Kethver almost smiled. Another primitive species, probably just learning to leave their homeworld. It was amazing how many races thought they could simply claim empty systems without permission from the galaxy's rightful rulers. Have they been contacted? According to standard protocols? He asked. Yes, sir. Colonial administrators sent the usual greeting and integration offers. The response was ... expected. Explain. The intelligence officer consulted his datapad nervously. The creatures claimed they had never heard of the Andorian hegemony. They stated they were representatives of something called the Terran Colonial Authority and demanded proof of our territorial claims. Now Kethver did smile. It was always amusing when primitive species tried to negotiate from positions of weakness. And their response to our proof? They ... rejected it, sir. They claimed their government did not recognize hegemony authority and cited various primitive legal documents. They demanded we withdraw from what they called human space. The word human was unfamiliar to Kethver, but he filed it away for later study. What mattered now was that another upstart species needed to learn their place in the galaxy's natural order. What designation have the xenobiologists given them? He asked. Classification pending, sir. But preliminary reports suggest Deathworlder Prime. Their preferred environmental conditions are beyond the tolerance range of all known intelligent species. High gravity worlds, radiation levels that would sterilize. Most planets, atmospheric compositions that are actively toxic. Some reports suggest they actually seek out the most dangerous worlds available. Kethver nodded thoughtfully. Deathworlders were rare but not unknown. Usually they were tough, stupid, creatures good for mining operations in hazardous environments. Their primitive technology suggested they would be easily conquered and put to useful work. How many ships have they deployed? He asked. Scout reports vary, sir. Estimates range from 50 to 200 vessels, mostly concentrated around their primary colony worlds. The ships appear to be heavily armed for their technological level, but with projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Nothing that could threaten a hegemony vessel. And their population? Unknown, sir. Our scouts have maintained distance to avoid contamination from their primitive drives. Population estimates range from tens of thousands to perhaps a few million. Across all their settlements? Kethver walked back to his command chair, considering the situation. A primitive Deathworlder species with perhaps a few million individuals, scattered across hostile worlds in dead space armed with metal ships and chemical weapons. It was almost too easy. Set course for Sector 7, he commanded. Signal the fleet to form standard subjugation formation. We will deal with these humans personally. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Orders flowed through the ship's crystal communication networks. Around the Eternal Glory, 11 other dreadnoughts adjusted their courses and began forming the geometric patterns that had struck fear into 1,000 worlds. As his fleet changed direction, Kethver reviewed the standard subjugation protocols in his mind. First would come the demonstration of power, usually destroying a few military installations or small ships. Then the ultimatum, surrender immediately and accept integration into the hegemony, or face complete extinction. Most species chose surrender. After seeing what hegemony weapons could do, those few that chose resistance rarely lasted more than a few hours. Their primitive weapons simply could not penetrate energy shields or damage crystal hulls. It was not even sporting anymore. But Kethver had to admit he was curious about these humans. What kind of species chose to live on worlds that would kill most intelligent life? What drove them to settle in the galaxy's most dangerous corners? And why did they think they're primitive? Authority could challenge 3,000 years of Andorian dominance. Admiral, his navigation officer called out. We will reach the edge of human space in 6 standard days. Excellent, Kethver replied. Signal Fleet Command that we expect to have this situation resolved within the week. Another primitive species will learn their place in the galactic order. He settled back into his command chair, already planning the report he would file after the conquest. Perhaps these humans would make good workers in the radioactive mining operations on Kepler 442. Their apparent resistance to hostile environments might prove useful. As the Third Fleet traveled deeper into the outer rim, passing dead stars and lifeless worlds, Kethver never imagined that he was about to encounter something that would challenge everything the hegemony believed about power, technology, and the nature of intelligent life itself. The humans were waiting for them in the darkness between the stars, and they had spent decades preparing for this moment. But Admiral Kethver, confident in 3,000 years of unbroken victory, sailed onward toward the most important battle in galactic history without knowing that his perfect, ordered world was about to come crashing down around him. In the depths of space, primitive metal ships moved with purpose among worlds that should have been impossible to colonize. And in hidden shipyards around radiation-soaked planets, something vast and terrible was stirring to life, ready to show the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology. It was their absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. 6 days later, Admiral Kethver stood on his bridge watching something that should not exist. Through the crystal viewport, he could see the human colony of New Sparta hanging in space around a world that glowed with deadly radiation, the planet. Below was a nightmare of toxic storms and crushing gravity. Yet somehow the humans had built a thriving settlement on its surface, but it was not the planet that concerned him. It was what surrounded it. "Report," he commanded, his voice tight. With confusion, his sensor officer, a young Andorian named Veltar, checked his readings 3 times before speaking. "Sir, I am detecting a massive orbital defense platform. Diameter approximately 8 kilometers. Energy readings are unusual. Unusual how? The power signatures do not match any known technology, sir. The energy output is enormous, but the generation method is unclear. It appears to be some form of fusion reaction, but at scales we have never seen before." Kethver frowned. Fusion power was primitive technology, something most species abandon once they learn to tap into zero-point energy fields. But the readings suggested the humans were using fusion on a scale that rivaled hegemony crystal reactors. "What about their ships?" he asked. 73 vessels detected, sir. They appear to be arranged in defensive formations around the platform. And colony design is consistent with previous reports, metal construction, chemical propulsion, but sir, yes? Some of these ships are much larger than our scouts reported. The biggest one is over 1 kilometer in length. That is larger than most hegemony cruisers. Kethver studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human formation showed a level of coordination that suggested experienced military leadership. Their ships moved in precise patterns, maintaining optimal firing solutions while protecting their civilian assets. This was not the behavior of a primitive species stumbling around in space. "Open communications," he ordered. "Standard subjugation protocol." The communications officer activated the quantum entanglement transmitter. Within seconds, a response came back. The main screen flickered and showed the interior of what appeared to be a human command center. The creature that appeared on screen was unlike anything in the hegemony's extensive xenobiology databases. It was short compared to an Andorian, with pale skin and strange hair growing from its head. But its eyes were what caught Kethver's attention. They were cold, calculating, and showed no trace of fear. "This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Colonial Defense Force," the creature said in perfect galactic standard. "You are trespassing in human space. State your business or withdraw immediately." Kethver was so surprised by the directness that he almost forgot his lines. No primitive species had ever spoken to him with such authority. They usually cowered or begged for mercy. "I am Admiral Kethver of the Andorian Hegemony Third Fleet," he replied, forcing confidence into his voice. "You are occupying territory belonging to the hegemony. By galactic law, you must surrender immediately and submit to integration protocols. The human's expression did not change. "We don't recognize your authority, Admiral. These systems were empty when we arrived. We claimed them legally under the Terran Colonial Charter. If you have documents proving prior ownership, present them, otherwise leave." Kethver felt his skin flush blue with anger. "I am your proof, creature. This fleet represents the power of the hegemony. We have ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. Your primitive understanding of law means nothing here." 3,000 years? The human leaned back in her chair and actually smiled. "That's interesting. Our deep space surveys found ruins of at least 12 different civilizations in this sector alone, all of them older than your hegemony. All of them extinct. Makes you wonder what happened to them, doesn't it?" The comment hit Kethver like a physical blow. The ruins were classified information, known only to the highest levels of hegemony command. How could these primitives have discovered them? And worse, how had they made the connection that the hegemony had destroyed those civilizations? "You will surrender immediately," he said, his voice harder now. "This is your final warning." The human stood up, and Kethver could see she was wearing some kind of military uniform. Behind her, other humans worked at control stations that looked surprisingly sophisticated for a primitive species. "No," she said simply. "We won't surrender. We won't bow. We won't kneel. If you want our worlds, you'll have to take them. But I promise you this, Admiral, we won't make it easy." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Kethver staring at a blank screen. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever spoken to the hegemony with such defiance. They either surrendered immediately or begged for mercy while being destroyed. They did not make promises about fighting back. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "the human platform is powering up some kind of defensive system? Energy readings are spiking across all spectrums. Show me." The tactical display revealed something impossible. The human defense platform was surrounded by a shimmering energy field that pulsed with rainbow colors. The energy readings were off the charts, higher than anything a primitive fusion reactor should be able to produce. "What kind of shield is that?" Kethver demanded. "Unknown, sir. The energy pattern does not match any recorded technology. It appears to be some form of electromagnetic manipulation, but the power requirements would be enormous." Kethver made his decision. These humans needed to learn their place immediately before their defiance could spread to other primitive species in the sector. "Target the defense platform," he ordered. "Single ship, demonstration shot. Low power setting, we will show them what real weapons can do." The Eternal Glory's main disintegration beam charged up with a deep, harmonic hum. The weapon was one of the most powerful in the hegemony arsenal, capable of reducing a mountain to atoms in seconds. Even at low power, it should vaporize any primitive shield these humans had constructed. "Firing," announced the weapons officer. A brilliant purple beam lanced out from the Eternal Glory, crossing the distance between the fleets in milliseconds. It struck the human platform's energy shield dead center, and ... nothing happened. The beam hit the rainbow-colored barrier and simply vanished. The energy did not splash or scatter. It did not penetrate or reflect. It just disappeared, absorbed into the shield as if it had never existed. "What?" Kethver whispered. "Sir, the beam has been completely absorbed. No damage to the target. No energy readings suggest the shield was even strained." Before Kethver could respond, the human platform fired back. What came at them was not an energy beam or a particle stream. It was a solid projectile, a piece of metal launched at incredible speed. Kethver's sensors screamed warnings as the projectile approached at nearly 1/10 the speed of light. "Impossible," he breathed. "No primitive species can accelerate solid matter to such velocities." The projectile struck the hegemony dreadnought Crystal Dawn before its energy shields could fully adapt. The metal slug punched through the crystal, hull like it was made of paper, tearing through deck after deck before exploding deep inside the ship's core. The Crystal Dawn died in a ball of brilliant fire, 3 kilometers of advanced hegemony technology reduced to glowing debris in less than 3 seconds. Kethver stared at the expanding cloud of wreckage in shock. A hegemony dreadnought destroyed. By a primitive projectile weapon, it was impossible. It was unthinkable. It was, "Sir," his tactical officer shouted. "Multiple launches from the human fleet. Projectiles incoming." The display lit up with dozens of red tracks as the human ships opened fire. More metal slugs screamed across space at impossible velocities. The hegemony ships tried to maneuver, their energy shields flickering to maximum power. It did not matter. The projectiles punched through energy barriers like they were not there. The radiant spear took 3 hits and broke apart, its crystal hull unable to withstand the kinetic impacts. The Golden Harmony tried to retreat but caught a projectile in its engine section, the explosion tearing the ship in half. "Return fire!" Kethver screamed. "All ships, maximum power!" 11 dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, their combined firepower enough to sterilize a planet. Purple beams lanced out toward the human fleet, striking their ships, and the humans had shields too. Not the rainbow barriers around their platform, but something else. The energy beams struck the human ships and scattered harmlessly, deflected by invisible barriers that bent the very laws of physics. "How are they doing this?" Kethver demanded. "How can primitives have such technology?" His science officer was frantically analyzing the sensor data. "Sir, their defensive systems appear to be manipulating gravitational fields. They are creating spatial distortions that redirect our weapons." "Gravity manipulation? That is theoretical technology. Our best scientists say it is impossible." "Apparently, sir, the humans did not read our scientific papers." Another human projectile struck the Eternal Glory, sending shockwaves through the massive ship. Crystal walls cracked and energy conduits exploded in showers of sparks. Kethver was thrown from his command chair as the ship shuddered under the impact. "Damage report," he called out. "Hull breach on decks 40 through 60. We have lost primary power to the forward weapons array. Sir, our crystal matrix is cracking. If we take another hit like that ... Kethver did not need him to finish. The Eternal Glory, flagship of the Third Fleet, was dying. Around him, the greatest naval force in hegemony, history was being torn apart by creatures that should not even understand the basics of space warfare. "Sir," his communications officer shouted over the chaos. "Message from the human Admiral Mitchell. Put it on screen." The human appeared again, but this time she was standing on what appeared to be the bridge of one of their warships. Behind her, Kethver could see humans working calmly at their stations, as if destroying hegemony dreadnoughts was a routine training exercise. "Admiral Kethver," she said, her voice perfectly steady, "I told you we wouldn't make it easy. This is your last chance. Withdraw your remaining ships and do not return. Next time, we won't hold back." "Hold back?" Kethver gasped. "You call this holding back?" "Admiral, you just attacked a colonial defense station with civilians aboard. We've been very restrained. The weapons we're using now are mining equipment and cargo movers. If you want to see our actual military hardware, please, keep fighting." Mining equipment? They were destroying the pride of the hegemony fleet with mining equipment. Kethver looked around his ruined bridge, at the displays showing 5 of his 12 ships reduced to debris, at the damage reports flooding in from his remaining vessels. This was not a battle, it was a slaughter. "All ships," he said quietly. "Retreat, maximum speed." The surviving ships of the Third Fleet turned and fled, their crystal hulls scarred and broken. Behind them, the humans did not pursue. They simply watched as the most powerful force in the galaxy ran away from a colonial defense station. As the Eternal Glory limped toward hegemony space, Kethver sat in his damaged command chair and tried to understand what had just happened. The humans had weapons that defied physics. They had shields that absorbed energy like it was nothing. They had turned industrial equipment into ship killers. But most terrifying of all, they had acted like this was normal. Like destroying hegemony dreadnoughts was just another day at the office. "Sir?" his communications officer said softly. "What do we tell Fleet Command?" Kethver stared out at the stars and realized that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy was wrong. The humans were not primitives. They were something else entirely. Something that made the hegemony's 1,000 conquered species look like children playing with toys. "Tell them," he said finally, "that we have found something that should not exist, and tell them to send everything we have," because Kethver had the terrible feeling that this was just the beginning. The Hegemony High Council chamber had not seen such chaos in 1,000 years. The great crystal dome that housed the galaxy's rulers buzzed with angry voices as the 12 Supreme Councilors argued over Admiral Kethver's impossible report. "Primitives do not destroy dreadnoughts," declared Councilor Morthak, his ancient blue skin glowing with indignation. "There must be some other explanation. Perhaps these humans have discovered ancient weapons. Perhaps they are not acting alone." "The sensor data is clear," replied Councilor Hithara, studying the tactical recordings for the 100th time. "These creatures absorbed our disintegration beams and fired solid projectiles at impossible velocities. They did this with technology we do not recognize." Supreme Councilor Andrus, eldest of the 12, raised his hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet immediately. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of 3 millennia of absolute power. "One defeat does not end an empire," he said slowly, "but it cannot be ignored. These humans represent a threat to the natural order. They must be crushed completely so that no other species gets ideas about resistance." He turned to the military coordinator, General Zixtar. "Assemble the subjugation armada. 200 ships, including the Worldbreaker. I want these humans erased from existence." "Sir," General Zixtar said carefully, "Admiral Kethver recommends we study their technology first. Perhaps we can learn." "No." Andrus's voice cut like crystal through steel. "We do not learn from primitives. We destroy them. The hegemony's superiority is absolute. Deploy the armada immediately." Across the galaxy, the greatest military force ever assembled began moving toward human space. The subjugation armada was the hegemony's ultimate weapon, used only when entire star systems needed to be completely eliminated. At its heart was the Worldbreaker, a vessel so massive it had its own gravitational field, capable of cracking planets in half with its primary weapon, but in the Tau Ceti system, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant's radioactive moon, something stirred to life that would change the balance of power forever. Captain Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of Deep Construction Platform 7, watching as the final sections of humanity's greatest secret were moved into place. The construction yard stretched for dozens of kilometers in every direction, filled with robotic workers and human engineers putting the finishing touches on a project decades in the making. "It's beautiful," said Commander James Park, the platform's chief engineer. "Terrifying, but beautiful." Sarah nodded, unable to take her eyes off the massive shape taking form before them. The TDF Prometheus was not just a ship. It was a statement. 15 kilometers of advanced human engineering, incorporating technology reverse-engineered from a dozen different alien encounters over the past 50 years. The ship's hull was made from metamaterials that bent light around them, making the vessel nearly invisible to most sensors. Its armor was adaptive, learning from each attack and becoming stronger. Its weapon systems combined human innovation with alien technology in ways that would have been impossible just decades earlier. "Status report?" Sarah asked. "Final weapon systems are coming online now," Commander Park replied. "The gravity manipulators are charged and ready. Antimatter magazines are at full capacity. The experimental inertial dampening system is showing green across all boards. And the crew? 50,000 of humanity's best? Every major colony contributed their finest officers and specialists. We also have our alien allies aboard, the Kithara refugees from the hegemony's conquest of their homeworld, the Tauvi miners who escaped the slave worlds, and even a few former hegemony citizens who chose freedom over empire." Sarah smiled grimly. The crew of the Prometheus represented something the galaxy had never seen before, a truly integrated force of different species working together by choice rather than conquest. The aliens who served alongside humans did so because they had witnessed what human determination could accomplish when properly motivated. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, "priority message from Earth Command. The hegemony has launched their response force. Deep space sensors are tracking over 200 ships headed our way. How long until they reach our territory?" 4 days, ma'am. "But Captain, there's something else. Intelligence reports that their flagship is the Worldbreaker. It's the ship they used to destroy the Cathara homeworld." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She had met Cathara refugees, seeing what the hegemony's ultimate weapon had done to their civilization. An entire world reduced to asteroids, billions of innocent lives snuffed out to make an example for other species. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships are to rendezvous at the edge of the new Sparta system. We meet them there." "Ma'am," Commander Park said quietly, "the Worldbreaker is 12 kilometers long. Our intelligence suggests it carries enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. Are you sure 500 ships will be enough?" Sarah turned away from the viewport and walked toward the shuttle bay. "Commander, in the past century, humanity has learned something very important about fighting impossible odds. It's not about having enough ships or enough firepower. It's about being too stubborn to quit." As her shuttle carried her toward the Prometheus, Sarah thought about the path that had brought humanity to this moment. First contact with alien life had not been the peaceful encounter that scientists had dreamed about. Instead, humanity had discovered a galaxy ruled by empires that saw other species as resources to be exploited. The first aliens humanity encountered were refugees fleeing hegemony expansion. From them, humans learned about galactic civilization and the brutal realities of interstellar politics. While the hegemony had dismissed these early contacts as unimportant, humanity had been learning, adapting, and preparing. Every piece of alien technology that fell into human hands was studied, improved, and incorporated into new designs. Human engineers had a talent for taking advanced concepts and finding ways to build them with simpler, more reliable methods. Where aliens used energy manipulation, humans used brute force engineering. Where aliens relied on exotic materials, humans found ways to achieve the same results with metamaterials and nanotechnology. The shuttle docked with the Prometheus, and Sarah made her way to the bridge. The command center was a fusion of human efficiency and alien elegance, with holographic displays showing real-time tactical information from across the galaxy. Her crew was already at their stations, preparing for the battle that would determine humanity's future. "Captain on the bridge," announced her first officer, Commander Elena Vasquez. "All systems are ready? We can launch whenever you give the word." Sarah settled into the captain's chair, feeling the ship's AI systems connect with her neural implants. The Prometheus was not just a vessel, it was an extension of her will, a tool of war designed to do what no human ship had ever done before. "Open a channel to Earth Command," she ordered. The main screen flickered, showing the underground command center on Earth where President Martinez and the Terran Defense Council were coordinating humanity's response to the hegemony threat. "Mr. President," Sarah said formally, "the Prometheus is ready for deployment. Request permission to engage the enemy." President Martinez, an old man who had lived through humanity's first encounters with hostile aliens, nodded slowly. "Captain Chun, you carry the hopes of our entire species. Show the galaxy that humanity will not be conquered." "Understood, sir. We'll make them remember this day." The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to her crew. These were humanity's finest veterans of the Proxima Wars, survivors of alien raids, engineers and scientists who had spent their lives preparing for this moment. They came from every nation on Earth, every colony in human space, united by a single purpose. "Helm, take us out," she ordered. The Prometheus began to move, its massive bulk sliding out of the construction yard with surprising grace as it cleared. The station, the ship's adaptive camouflage activated, bending light around its hull until it became nearly invisible against the stars. But as they traveled toward the rendezvous point, the ship's movement created gravitational anomalies that rippled through subspace. every species within 100 light-years with the technology to detect such disturbances suddenly knew that something enormous was moving through their galaxy. On the bridge of a Nereid trade ship, Captain Silthara watched her sensors spike, with readings that should not exist. What could create such gravitational disturbance? She wondered aloud. Her science officer checked the readings 3 times before responding. Captain, the mass displacement suggests something at least 15 kilometers in length, moving at significant sublight velocity, but there's nothing in our databases that matches this signature. Similar conversations were happening on ships throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrian Enforcement Fleet detected the anomaly and immediately began investigating. Independent traders changed course to avoid whatever massive object was moving through space. Even the hegemony's own deep space monitoring stations registered the disturbance and sent urgent reports to their commanders, but by the time anyone could respond, the Prometheus had reached its destination. Sarah stood on her bridge watching as 500 human warships took formation around her vessel. Every ship in the Terran Defense Fleet was present: cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and support vessels, all working together in perfect coordination. "Captain," reported her tactical officer, "long-range sensors are detecting the Hegemony Armada. They'll be here in 18 hours. Good," Sarah replied. "That gives us time to prepare one final surprise for our guests." She activated the ship's internal communication system, her voice reaching every member of the 50,000 crew aboard the Prometheus. "Attention all hands. In 18 hours we will face the largest military force in galactic history. They come here expecting to find primitives with simple weapons. Instead, they will discover that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology." She paused, looking out at the fleet surrounding her ship. "Our strength is our refusal to accept the impossible. Our strength is our ability to adapt and overcome. Our strength is our unwillingness to kneel before anyone who claims to be our master." Throughout the ship, humans and aliens worked side by side, preparing weapons that had never been tested in combat, calibrating systems that pushed the boundaries of known physics, and readying themselves for a battle that would echo through galactic history. "They think they know what we are," Sarah continued. "They think we are just another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. Tomorrow we show them what humanity really is. We show them what happens when you threaten our families, our homes, our freedom." As the Prometheus and its escort fleet waited in the darkness between stars, the greatest military force in galactic history was approaching. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the hegemony was about to encounter an enemy that refused to be intimidated by superior numbers or advanced technology. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes. Admiral Kethver stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Infinite Wrath, watching the approaching human system with grim satisfaction. Behind him stretched the most powerful fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 200 of the hegemony's finest warships moved in perfect formation, their crystal hulls gleaming like deadly jewels against the stars. At the center of the armada was the World Breaker, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed every other ship in the fleet. 12 kilometers of pure destructive power, it was the weapon the hegemony used when they wanted to make examples of entire civilizations. Its primary cannon could crack planets in half with a single shot. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we are entering the outer edge of the human system. Sensors are detecting their fleet waiting for us." Kethver nodded. After his humiliating defeat at New Sparta, he had expected the humans to try running deeper into their territory. The fact that they had chosen to make a stand here suggested either incredible bravery or terminal stupidity. "What are their numbers?" he asked. "Approximately 500 vessels, sir. They appear to be arranged in a defensive formation around a single large ship." "Show me." The main display activated, revealing the human fleet hanging in space like an angry swarm of metal insects. Their ships were the same angular, primitive designs as before, but Kethver noticed they had been reinforced with additional armor and weapons since their last encounter. The center of their formation was something that made him pause. It was huge, easily matching the Worldbreaker in size, but its design was unlike anything in hegemony databases. The hull seemed to bend light around it, making it difficult to focus on directly. Analysis of the large vessel? He demanded. His science officer worked frantically at his console before responding. Sir, the readings are unusual. The ship appears to be approximately 15 kilometers in length, but our sensors are having difficulty getting accurate scans. Some kind of stealth technology is interfering with our instruments. 15 kilometers? Kethver felt a chill run down his spine. Ships that large required massive industrial capacity to build. These humans were supposed to be a primitive species that had barely achieved spaceflight. Sir, his communications officer called out, the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through. The face that appeared on the screen was the same human female who had defied him at New Sparta. Admiral Sarah Mitchell looked calm and confident, showing no fear despite being outnumbered 4-1. Admiral Kethver, she said. I remember you. You're the one who ran away after we destroyed half your fleet with mining equipment. Angry murmurs rippled through the bridge. No one had ever spoken to a hegemony admiral with such disrespect. I am here to correct that mistake, Kethver replied coldly. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. You know, the human said, leaning back in her chair, we've been studying your people for 50 years. We know about the 12 civilizations you wiped out. We know about the slave worlds. We know about the Worldbreaker and what you did to the Kithara homeworld. She stood up, and Kethver could see other humans working calmly at their stations behind her. We also know that no one has ever fought back successfully. Well, Admiral, today that changes. Today you learn that some species refuse to kneel. The transmission ended, leaving Kethver staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers waited for orders. All ships, he commanded. Attack formation, destroy them all. The subjugation armada spread out into its traditional overwhelming assault pattern, energy weapons charged to maximum power. Crystal hulls gleamed with deadly purpose. This was how the hegemony had conquered 1,000 worlds, but as they closed the distance to the human fleet, something strange happened. The large ship at the center of the human formation began to change. Its hull rippled like liquid metal, and weapons emerged from hidden compartments all along its massive length. Sir, his tactical officer called out urgently. That ship, it's not just large. It's armed with weapons we don't recognize. Energy signatures are off the charts. Before Kethver could respond, the human ship fired. The first weapon was something the hegemony had never seen before. Instead of an energy beam or particle stream, space itself seemed to twist and fold. A dozen hegemony cruisers simply disappeared, not destroyed, not vaporized. They ceased to exist as reality bent around them and crushed them out of existence. What was that? Kethver screamed. Gravity manipulation, sir. They're creating localized singularities. The ships were pulled apart by tidal forces. The human ship fired again, and another section of the hegemony formation vanished into twisted space. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years were being erased from existence by weapons that shouldn't be possible. Return fire. All ships. Maximum power. 180 hegemony warships opened fire simultaneously. The combined energy output was enough to boil the oceans of a dozen worlds. Purple beams of pure destruction lanced across space toward the human fleet. The beams struck the large human ship and simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, but stopped. The energy hung in space for a moment, then began flowing back toward the ship's hull, disappearing into systems that defied understanding. Impossible, Kethver whispered. No shield can absorb that much energy. The human response was swift and terrible. The large ship's secondary weapons came online, and Kethver realized with horror that he was looking at antimatter torpedoes. Not the small tactical warheads used by primitive species, but massive strategic weapons that carried the destructive power of small stars. The first torpedo struck the eternal radiance, and the entire ship simply ceased to exist in a ball of perfect annihilation. The second hit the crystal harmony, erasing it from reality so completely that not even debris remained. "Evasive maneuvers," Kethver ordered. "All ships, scatter." But the humans had planned for this. As the hegemony ships broke formation, the smaller human vessels opened fire with the same projectile weapons that had devastated the Third Fleet, but these were not mining charges. These were purpose-built ship killers, fired from magnetic accelerators the size of city blocks. The projectiles punched through crystal hulls like they were made of paper. Ships that had never known defeat were torn apart by chunks of metal, moving at impossible speeds. The Radiant Dawn tried to retreat but caught 3 projectiles in its engine section, the kinetic impacts shattering its crystal matrix completely. "Sir," his science officer called out in panic, "the human weapons are adapting. Each shot is more effective than the last." Kethver watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. The humans were not fighting like any species in recorded history. They were learning from each engagement, adapting their tactics in real time, finding weaknesses in hegemony technology that no one had ever exploited before. "Signal the world breaker," he ordered desperately. "Tell them to target the large ship with the planet killer." The massive dreadnought turned its primary weapon toward the human vessel. The planet cracker charged up with a deep harmonic resonance that could be felt through the hulls of every ship in the fleet. When it fired, the energy beam was so powerful it created a temporary star in the void between the fleets. The beam struck the human ship directly, and the ship rammed straight through it. The human vessel's experimental inertial dampeners allowed it to accelerate to near-light speed without crushing its crew. It punched through the planet-killing energy beam. Like it was made of mist, its adaptive armor absorbing and redirecting the devastating power. The World Breaker had seconds to register what was happening before 15 kilometers of human engineering struck it at a significant fraction of light speed. The impact created a brief new sun as matter and antimatter mixed in ways that physics barely allowed. When the light faded, the pride of the hegemony fleet was gone, reduced to expanding plasma that would glow for decades. But impossibly, the human ship emerged from the other side of the explosion, its hull scarred but intact. It had survived a collision that should have destroyed both vessels. "How?" Kethver gasped. "How is that possible?" "Sir," his tactical officer reported in a shaking voice, "that ship appears to have some kind of structural integrity field. It's holding together through forces that would tear apart any normal vessel." Around the human flagship, the rest of their fleet continued the slaughter. Hegemony ships tried to retreat but found their escape routes cut off by human vessels that moved with impossible coordination. Every time a crystal ship tried to flee, it found itself facing weapons that had learned its weaknesses and adapted to exploit them. The infinite wrath shuddered as projectiles began impacting its hull. Kethver felt the ship dying around him as human weapons found weak points in crystal matrix that shouldn't exist. "Sir," his communications officer called out desperately, "the humans are broadcasting again. Put it through." Admiral Sarah Mitchell appeared on screen again, but this time she was standing on what was clearly the bridge of the massive human warship. Behind her, Kethver could see humans and aliens working together at control stations, coordinating the destruction of his fleet with calm efficiency. "Admiral Kethver," she said, "your Worldbreaker is dead. Half your fleet is debris. The other half will be scrap metal within the hour. Do you want to know why you're losing?" Kethver said nothing, staring at her with growing terror. "You rely on superiority," she continued. "You expect your enemies to be intimidated by your power. You've never fought anyone who refused to be impressed by your reputation." The human ship fired again, and 3 more hegemony cruisers vanished into twisted space. "We don't care how advanced you are. We don't care how many worlds you've conquered. We don't care about your 3,000 years of dominance. We care about one thing, protecting our people, and we'll do whatever it takes to accomplish that." Behind her, tactical displays showed the systematic destruction of the subjugation Armada. The greatest military force in galactic history was being torn apart by weapons that combined human engineering with alien technology in ways that created something entirely new. "This is impossible," Kethver whispered. "Admiral, the human," said softly, "the word impossible just means we haven't figured out how to do it yet. Today you learned what happens when someone refuses to accept your definition of impossible." The infinite wrath shook as more projectiles found their mark. Systems failed throughout the ship as the crystal matrix began to crack. "Retreat," Kethver ordered quietly. "All remaining ships retreat." "Maximum speed." The survivors of the subjugation armada turned and fled, leaving behind the wreckage of 200 warships and the shattered remains of hegemony pride. As they escaped into hyperspace, they carried with them the news that would change the galaxy forever. The humans had not just won a battle. They had proven that the hegemony could be defeated. And across the galaxy, oppressed species who had submitted to alien rule for thousands of years began to wonder if freedom might actually be possible. In the aftermath of the battle, the human ship called Prometheus hung silent among the debris of its enemies, scarred but victorious. It had done the impossible, and the galaxy would never be the same. News of the subjugation armada's destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every major communication network was buzzing with impossible reports. The hegemony's greatest fleet destroyed. The Worldbreaker erased from existence. 200 ships reduced to debris by a species that most galactic citizens had never heard of. On the crystal world of Andor Prime, Supreme Counselor Andros stood in his private chamber, staring at the tactical reports with growing disbelief. The holographic displays showed the aftermath of the battle in stark detail. Debris fields where proud dreadnoughts once sailed, energy signatures that defied known physics, and at the center of it all, a single massive human ship that had somehow survived ramming the Worldbreaker at near light speed. "This cannot be accurate," he said to General Zixtar, who had delivered the report personally. "No primitive species possesses such technology." "Sir," the general replied carefully, "Admiral Kethver's surviving ships all confirm the same details. The humans have weapons that manipulate gravity itself. Their ship absorbed our most powerful energy beams without taking damage. They fought like no species we have ever encountered." Andros turned away from the displays. In 3,000 years of conquest, the hegemony had never faced a military defeat of this magnitude. Individual battles had been lost before, but always against other advanced species who understood the rules of galactic warfare. This was different. This was a complete reversal of everything the hegemony believed about power and technology. "What are our remaining military assets?" he asked. "The first and second fleets are still intact, sir. Approximately 300 ships total. The fortress worlds maintain their defense platforms, but Sir... General Zixtar hesitated. "Morale among the fleet commanders is extremely low. Word of the defeat has spread to every ship in our navy. And the subject species? That is where our real problems begin, sir." Before General Zixtar could elaborate, alarms began sounding throughout the Crystal Palace. Emergency communication requests flooded in from across the galaxy. Andros activated the main display and immediately understood the scope of the crisis. On Zephyr Prime, the insectoid enforcers who had served the hegemony faithfully for centuries were in open revolt. Their four-armed warriors had turned their weapons against hegemony garrisons, declaring independence for their homeworld. The same species that had crushed 100 rebellions was now leading one of their own. The Zephyrians cite the human victory as proof that the hegemony can be defeated, General Zixtar reported. Their war leaders are calling for all oppressed species to rise up while the hegemony is weakened. On the aquatic world of Nereid, the economic administrators who managed galactic trade routes had simply stopped working. Without their vast underwater computer networks, the flow of resources that fed the hegemony war machine ground to a halt. Cargo ships sat idle in space as the economic backbone of the empire collapsed. "The Nereidans are not actively rebelling," the general continued, "but they have withdrawn all cooperation. They claim they cannot support a government that cannot protect them from human aggression. But the real shock came from the outer territories. Dozens of minor species that had accepted hegemony rule for generations were declaring independence. Simultaneously, mining colonies refused to ship resources. Agricultural worlds stopped food deliveries. Manufacturing centers shut down production lines. "It's spreading, sir," General Zixtar said grimly. "Every subject species is questioning our authority. Some are fleeing toward human space, claiming they want protection from the species that defeated our greatest fleet." Andrus watched the galaxy burn on his displays and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. Not fear of death, but fear of irrelevance. The hegemony's power had always rested on the belief that resistance was impossible. Now the humans had proven otherwise, and that belief was crumbling everywhere. "Signal the remaining fleets," he ordered. "Full mobilization. We will crush these rebellions and then deal with the humans personally." "Sir," General Zixtar said quietly, "our intelligence reports suggest the humans are not pursuing military conquest. Their ship, the Prometheus, has begun what appears to be a diplomatic tour of the galaxy." "Explain." "They are visiting worlds that have declared independence from the hegemony. Not to conquer them, sir, but to offer protection and alliance. They are building a coalition of free species united against our rule." The display shifted to show the impossible sight of the massive human warship in orbit around the Cathara, refugee world of Haven. The crystalline beings who had fled their destroyed homeworld were meeting with human diplomats, forming agreements. That would have been unthinkable just days before Captain Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching shuttlecraft ferry refugees from the surface of Haven to the human fleet. The Cathara survivors moved like living crystal sculptures, their bodies reflecting light in patterns that conveyed complex emotions. Many of them were weeping with joy. "Captain," said Commander Elena Vasquez, approaching with a datapad, "the Cathara Council has officially requested membership in the Terran Alliance. They're offering their crystal-growing technology in exchange for protection from hegemony retaliation." Sarah nodded, still watching the shuttles. "What's our status with the other worlds?" 17 independent systems have joined the Alliance in the past week. The Zephyrians are sending a formal delegation. Even some of the minor hegemony member species are secretly reaching out through back channels. It was extraordinary, Sarah thought. In one battle, humanity had not just defeated the galaxy's greatest military force. They had shattered the psychological foundation that kept billions of beings in chains. The hegemony's power had always depended on the belief that resistance was futile. Now that belief was gone. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "Priority message from Earth Command. President Martinez wants to speak with you directly." The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar underground command center on Earth. President Martinez looked older than when she had last seen him, the weight of recent events clear on his face. "Captain Chun," he said, "I've been reviewing the galactic situation reports. What you've accomplished is remarkable, but I'm concerned about the long-term implications. Sir, we've become the center of a galactic revolution. Dozens of species are looking to us for leadership against the hegemony. That's a responsibility we never asked for." Sarah considered his words carefully. It was true that humanity had never sought to become galactic liberators. They had simply refused to surrender when threatened. But the consequences of that refusal were spreading far beyond what anyone had anticipated. "What are your orders, sir?" she asked. "Continue the diplomatic mission, but remember our primary goal. We want to protect human colonies and establish peaceful coexistence. We're not trying to build an empire of our own." "Understood, sir." "But, Mr. President, these species have been enslaved for thousands of years. We might be their only chance at freedom." Martinez was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with the magnitude of the decision before him. "Captain, use your judgment. Help where you can, but don't commit humanity to conflicts we can't sustain. We're still just one species." among thousands. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah to contemplate the impossible situation they found themselves in. Humanity had wanted only to be left alone to develop their colonies in peace. Instead, they had become the focal point of the largest rebellion in galactic history. "Captain," Commander Vasquez said softly, "long-range sensors are detecting hegemony. Fleet movements. It looks like they're mobilizing their remaining forces. How many ships?" "Approximately 300, sir. They appear to be converging on the core systems where the rebellions are strongest." Sarah felt a chill. The hegemony might be weakened, but 300 ships could still devastate the newly independent worlds. Most of the rebel species had no military forces capable of standing against crystal dreadnoughts. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "We're changing course. If the hegemony wants to crush rebellions, they'll have to go through us first." As the Prometheus and its escort fleet began moving toward the core systems, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. Species that had never cooperated before began working together. Zephyrian warriors provided security for Nereid trade networks. Kithara engineers shared crystal-growing technology with human colonies. Dozens of minor species contributed resources and knowledge to the growing alliance. For the first time in galactic history, cooperation was spreading faster than conquest. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. Their remaining fleet struck at rebel worlds with overwhelming force, trying to crush the uprising before it could spread further. But everywhere they went, they found human ships waiting for them. Not just the Prometheus, but hundreds of vessels that had been upgraded with hybrid human-alien technology. The battles were fierce but brief. Hegemony crystal ships, designed to intimidate primitive species, found themselves facing weapons that had learned from the destruction of the subjugation armada. Human gravity manipulators tore through energy shields. Antimatter torpedoes erased dreadnoughts from existence. Most importantly, the psychological advantage that had sustained hegemony rule for millennia was gone. Within 6 months, the galactic communication networks fell silent. Not from fear, but from chaos. The old order was collapsing faster than anyone could track. Independent governments sprang up on hundreds of worlds. Trade routes reorganized around cooperation rather than exploitation. Ancient grievances between species were set aside in favor of mutual defense against the fading empire. The Andorian hegemony, which had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, found itself reduced to its core systems, surrounded by a growing alliance of free species united by a simple principle: no one had the right to rule over others without consent. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Sarah Chun received reports from across the galaxy. Independent worlds were establishing their own governments. Former enemy species were working together on joint projects. The refugees who had fled hegemony, oppression, were returning home to rebuild their civilizations. "Captain," Commander Vasquez said, reviewing the latest intelligence reports, "hegemony military assets are down to less than 50 active ships. Most of their subject species have either joined the alliance or declared neutrality. They're effectively contained to their home systems." Sarah nodded, but she felt no triumph. The transformation of galactic civilization had come at a terrible cost. Millions had died in the rebellions. Entire star systems had been devastated by fighting. The old stability was gone, replaced by uncertainty and chaos. "What's the status of the peace negotiations?" she asked. "The hegemony has agreed to talks, but they're insisting on maintaining control of their core worlds. The alliance representatives are split on whether to accept." Sarah looked out at the stars and thought about the choice before them. They could finish what they had started, hunt down the remaining hegemony forces, and end their empire forever. Or they could choose a different path, one that proved civilization could advance through cooperation rather than conquest. "Signal. Alliance Command," she said finally. "Recommend we accept the hegemony's terms with conditions. They keep their core worlds, but they renounce all claims to former territories and agree to non-interference with independent systems." "Captain, many of our allies want complete victory. They've suffered under hegemony rule for centuries. Commander, if we become conquerors, we become everything we fought against. Our strength was never our weapons or our ships. It was our refusal to accept that freedom was impossible. As the Prometheus continued its patrol through the transformed galaxy, Sarah Chen reflected on what humanity had accomplished. They had not set out to become galactic liberators. They had simply refused to kneel when ordered to surrender. But that refusal had sparked something that would reshape civilization for millennia to come. The galaxy would never be silent again. It would ring with the voices of free species, working together to build something better than empire. And at the heart of it all would be the lesson humanity had taught them, that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe is the simple word, no. The age of empires was ending. The age of cooperation had begun.
The UNHS Compassion floated in the darkness of space, its white hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. Red crosses marked its sides, visible from every angle, a universal symbol of healing and help. The hospital ship was Earth's pride, a moving city of medicine built to serve all beings in this part of the galaxy. Captain Jane Harris stood on the command deck, watching the stars through the large window. Her gray uniform was clean and pressed, the blue medical patch on her shoulder catching the light. She was proud of this ship and its mission. After years of war and distrust, Earth was finally showing the galaxy a different side of humanity. "Captain, the Arcturian delegation will arrive in 6 hours," said Officer Tom, looking up from his screen. Jane nodded. "Is Dr. Reed ready for them?" "Yes, Captain. He has 3 quarantine sections prepared." Jane turned away from the window. The Arcturians were not Earth's friends. They were a proud, warrior-like people who had fought against humans in the border wars 20 years ago. But now they needed help. A strange disease was killing thousands on their homeworld, and Earth's doctors were the best in the galaxy. "Tell me about our security," Jane said, walking to the central table where a map of the ship glowed blue. Officer Tom pressed some buttons, and red dots appeared on the map. "We have 30 security officers. Not many, but we are a hospital ship. We're not supposed to need fighters." Jane frowned. "The Arcturians are proud. Coming to us for help must be hard for them. Do you think they might cause trouble?" "I hope not, but keep everyone alert." In the medical wing, Dr. Thomas Reed checked his equipment one more time. He was a tall man with kind eyes and steady hands that had saved lives across 3 star systems. Today, he needed to be perfect. The Arcturians were bringing their sickest people, and nobody knew exactly what was killing them. "Doctor, the blood scanners are ready," said Nurse Paul, a young man from Earth's colony on Mars. "And the isolation rooms are set at Arcturian body temperature." "Good," Thomas said. "What about the medicine?" Paul handed him a tablet. "We have everything you asked for." Thomas looked at the list and nodded. "Let's hope it's enough. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." In another part of the ship, Ambassador Mark Wilson met with his team. He was shorter than most of the crew, with dark hair going gray at the sides. His job was to make sure the Arcturians felt welcome, even while keeping Earth's interests safe. "Remember," he told his 5 team members, "the Arcturians value strength and directness. Don't smile too much. Don't try to be their friends. Just be honest and firm." A young woman raised her hand. "Sir, what about the message we got from Earth Intelligence?" Mark's face became serious. "That's why we're having this meeting. Intelligence thinks some Arcturian military leaders don't want this mission to succeed. They don't want to appear weak by needing human help. Do you think they would try something against a hospital ship?" asked another team member, looking worried. "No," Mark said after a moment. "Even the Arcturians follow the galactic peace rules. Attacking a clearly marked hospital ship would turn every other species against them. They're proud, not stupid." But Mark didn't feel as confident as he sounded. He had spent years studying the Arcturians, and he knew how deeply they hated showing any weakness. Coming to humans, their old enemies, for medical help was probably causing huge fights among their leaders. Meanwhile, hidden among the asteroids not far from the Compassion, another ship waited. The Arcturian battle cruiser Vengeance was dark and silent, its engines off to avoid detection. Unlike the hospital ship, it was built for one purpose: war. Commander Drall stood on his bridge, watching the distant shape of the human ship on his screen. He was tall even for an Arcturian, with gray skin and eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. His uniform was black with gold marks showing his high rank. "Commander, the human ship is still in position," said his second-in-command. "They suspect nothing." Drall nodded. "And our timing?" "Perfect. They are expecting the medical ships from our homeworld soon. When our attack ships arrive instead, they won't know until it's too late." Drall smiled, showing sharp teeth. "Good. The High Command was clear. This disease makes us look weak. If humans treat it, they will use it against us in the future. Better to end this problem now." "Sir, it is a hospital ship," said a younger officer quietly. "The galactic rules say." "The rules," Drall cut him off, "were made to control the strong. Are we strong or weak, Officer Tech?" The young officer straightened his back. "Strong, sir. Then we will act like the strong. The human ship must be destroyed, and all evidence with it. No one will know who attacked them." Back on the Compassion, Engineer Anna Lee checked the ship's systems one last time before the Arcturian arrival. The hospital ship had little in the way of defenses. Most of its power went to running the advanced medical equipment. Its shields were designed to protect against space debris and radiation, not weapons. Anna wiped sweat from her forehead. The engine room was always hot. "How does everything look, computer?" "All systems operating at optimal levels," the ship's AI responded. "Medical Deck 3 is drawing extra power for quarantine preparations." "That's fine," Anna said. "Dr. Reed needs everything perfect for these patients." She finished her checks and headed for the mess hall. She wanted to get some food before things got busy with the Arcturian arrival. As she walked, she passed crew members from a dozen Earth colonies and even a few non-humans who had joined the medical mission. The Compassion was a place of healing for everyone, no matter where they came from. On the command deck, Captain Jane received a message. "Captain, we're picking up approaching ships." "The Arcturian medical transports?" she asked. Officer Tom looked confused. "I'm not sure. They're coming from the wrong direction, and they're not answering our calls." Jane felt a chill run down her spine. "Show me." The screen filled with images of 5 ships moving fast toward the Compassion. They were not medical transports. They were warships. "Send out the emergency message," Jane ordered, her voice steady despite her fear. "Tell them we are a hospital ship protected under Galactic Rule 15, and get Ambassador Wilson up here now." As the crew rushed to follow her orders, Jane stared at the approaching ships. Why would they do this? She whispered to herself. What could they possibly gain? She didn't know that in a few hours her question would be answered with fire and death, and that Earth's response would change the galaxy forever. Alarms blared throughout the UNHS Compassion. Red lights flashed in every corridor, turning the white walls an angry crimson. Crew members who had been preparing for a medical mission now ran to emergency stations, their faces tight with fear and in disbelief. Captain Jane Harris stood firm on the command deck, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "Broadcast our status again on all channels," she ordered. "Make sure they understand we are a hospital ship." Officer Tom's fingers flew across his control panel. "Broadcasting now, Captain." Still no response from the approaching vessels. Ambassador Mark Wilson burst onto the deck, his usually neat hair messy from his rush to get there. "Captain, what's happening? Are those Arcturian military ships?" Jane nodded grimly. 5 warships, coming in fast. They're not answering our calls. Mark's face went pale. They wouldn't dare. Even they must know the consequences of attacking the hospital ship. "Get me a direct line to their fleet commander," Jane said. "Maybe they'll listen to a human voice." Down in the medical wing, Dr. Thomas Reed felt the ship shudder. He grabbed a desk to stay on his feet as the floor seemed to jump beneath him. "What was that?" asked Nurse Paul, steadying a tray of medical tools that almost fell. Thomas didn't answer. He rushed to the nearest communication panel and pressed the emergency button. "Command deck, this is Dr. Reed. What's happening?" The voice that answered was not Captain Jane's but Officer Tom's, and it was filled with tension. "Dr. Reed, we have hostile ships approaching. The captain has ordered all medical staff to begin emergency protocols." Thomas felt cold inside. Emergency protocols meant one thing. They were under attack. "Understood," he said, then turned to his medical team who were all staring at him. "Listen carefully. We need to move all critical patients to the intersections. Start prepping the emergency escape pods for those who can be moved." As his team rushed to follow orders, Thomas took a deep breath. This wasn't supposed to happen. Nobody attacked hospital ships. It was one of the oldest rules in space. In the engineering section, Anna Lee worked frantically to reroute power to the ship's weak defensive shields. The Compassion was not built for battle. Its shields were designed to protect against space debris and radiation, not weapon fire. "We need more power to the forward shields," she shouted to her team over the wail of alarms. "Take it from the backup life support if you have to." A young engineer looked at her with wide eyes. "But regulations say." "Forget the regulations," Anna snapped. "We're under attack. If those shields fail, regulations won't matter because we'll be dead." On the Arcturian warship Vengeance, Commander Drawl watched with cold satisfaction as his fleet moved into attack position. "Target their communication arrays first," he ordered. "Then their engines. I want the ship disabled before they can send a clear distress call." His weapons officer nodded. "Yes, Commander. Weapons locked on target." "Sir," said Officer Tech hesitantly, "their broadcasts confirm they are a hospital ship. The markings are clear." "If we do this..." Drawl cut him off with a sharp gesture. "The decision is made. High Command has spoken. The humans must not gain influence with our people through this disease. Our scanner shows they have minimal defenses. This will be quick." He turned to his weapons officer. "Fire." Back on the Compassion, Captain Jane was still trying to establish communication when the first blast hit. The ship rocked violently, throwing several crew members to the floor. Sparks showered from a damaged control panel. "Direct hit to our main communications array," shouted Officer Tom, his hands flying over his console. "We've lost long-range communications." Jane gripped the edge of the command table. "Emergency power to shields. Send a distress call on all remaining channels." Ambassador Mark steadied himself against a wall. "Captain, I need to send a message to Earth right now. We need to tell them exactly who is attacking us." Jane nodded. "Use the emergency transmitter in my office. It has its own power source." As Mark hurried away, the ship shook again, harder this time. The lights flickered and went out for a moment before emergency power kicked in. "They hit our main power core," reported Officer Tom, his face lit only by the glow of his screen now. "Shields are at 30% and falling." Jane hit the ship-wide communication button. "All crew, this is Captain Harris. Proceed to emergency escape pods. I repeat, all non-essential personnel proceed to escape pods immediately." In the medical wing, Dr. Thomas and his team worked quickly to move patients. Some could walk with help, but many were on beds that had to be rolled through the corridors. "This way," Thomas shouted, directing a group of nurses pushing beds toward the escape pod section. Quickly. Another blast rocked the ship, and a support beam crashed down just meters away from them. Thomas heard screams from somewhere deeper in the ship. "Keep moving," he ordered. "We can't help them if we don't get these patients out." Nurse Paul looked back, torn between following orders and helping those who were screaming. "Doctor, there are people trapped back there." Thomas grabbed his shoulder. "I know. But these patients can't save themselves. We have to make choices now." In the engineering section, Anna worked in near darkness as systems failed around her. The ship was dying, and she knew it. All engineering crew to escape pods, she ordered. There's nothing more we can do here. As her team ran for the exit, Anna stayed at her console for one more moment, trying to squeeze just a little more power to the shields protecting the escape pod base. It might give a few more people time to get away. On the command deck, Jane received the worst news yet. "Captain," said Officer Tom, his voice shaking, "they're targeting the escape pods." Jane's blood turned to ice. "What?" "The Arcturian ships are firing on our escape pods as they launch." For the first time, Jane felt real fury mixing with her fear. "Get me any working weapons system we have," she ordered. "Anything at all." "Captain, we only have 2-point defense turrets. They're meant for clearing space debris, not fighting warships." "I don't care. Target their weapons systems and fire." In his office, Ambassador Mark finished sending his emergency message to Earth. He had included everything: the unprovoked attack, the identity of the attackers, and their targeting of escape pods. As he pressed the final button to send the message, the room around him exploded. On the Vengeance, Commander Drawl watched the hospital ship breaking apart, sections of it venting atmosphere into space. He saw tiny escape pods fleeing like seeds from a bursting fruit. "Target those pods," he ordered. "No witnesses." Officer Tech stepped forward. "Commander, they are unarmed civilians and medical staff." "This is wrong." Drawl turned to him slowly. "Are you refusing an order, officer?" The younger Arcturian stood straight. "Yes, Commander. I cannot be part of this." Without hesitation, Drawl drew his sidearm and shot Officer Tech in the chest. As the young officer collapsed, Drawl looked around the bridge. "Does anyone else wish to question orders?" The bridge crew turned back to their stations in silence. "Continue firing," Drawl said calmly. "Leave nothing intact." The UNHS Compassion, once a symbol of humanity's commitment to healing, broke into pieces against the blackness of space. Its white hull, marked with red crosses, turned to floating debris. Of the 2,000 crew and patients aboard, only a handful of escape pods managed to slip away into the darkness. But Ambassador Mark's message had been sent, and on Earth, the response was already beginning. Admiral James Walker sat in the dimly lit Strategic Command Center on Earth. The large room was quiet except for the soft beeping of computers and the occasional murmur of staff. Screens covered the walls, showing the positions of Earth ships throughout the galaxy. James was a tall man with gray hair and a face that had seen too many wars. He had hoped those days were behind him. Earth had been at peace for 15 years. The hospital ships like the Compassion were supposed to be the future, healing instead of fighting. A young officer hurried across the room toward him, her face pale. "Admiral, we've received an emergency transmission from the UNHS Compassion." James straightened in his chair, put it on the main screen. The largest screen flickered, then showed Ambassador Mark Wilson's face. The image was blurry and full of static, but his fear was clear. "This is Ambassador Wilson on the UNHS Compassion. We are under attack by Arcturian military vessels. They have disabled our communications and engines. They air." The image shook violently. "Firing on our escape pods." "Repeat, they are targeting unarmed escape pods. This is a deliberate attack on a clearly marked hospital ship. The attackers are confirmed as Arcturian military vessels from the 7th Fleet under Commander Drawl. We need immediate." The message cut off in a burst of static. The room fell completely silent. "They attacked a hospital ship," James whispered, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "Sir," said the communications officer, "we've lost all contact with the Compassion. Last sensor readings show." She hesitated. "Show what?" James demanded. "The ship has been destroyed, sir. Sensors detected escape pods being targeted." James stood up slowly. His face was like stone, but his eyes burned. "Get me the president. Now." In the White House, President Linda Marshall sat at the head of a long table. Around her were the 12 members of the United World Council, the highest leaders from Earth and its colonies. The room was tense with shock and anger. "The attack has been confirmed," Linda said, her voice steady despite her fury. "The UNHS Compassion has been destroyed by Arcturian military forces. They deliberately targeted a hospital ship and then hunted down the escape pods." "How many survivors?" asked the representative from Mars Colony. "Unknown. Few, if any," Linda replied. The room filled with angry murmurs. Admiral James stood up with a tablet in his hand. "Madam President, Council members, I have prepared a response plan." "Let's hear it." "Admiral," Linda said, "the plan is called Protocol Omega. It was created after the border wars as a last resort if Earth ever faced another existential threat." He looked around the table. "It calls for the immediate activation of our hidden defense network." The council members exchanged surprised glances. "What hidden defense network?" asked the Europa Colony representative. James touched his tablet, and the wall screen lit up with images of ships and space stations that looked ordinary: cargo vessels, mining platforms, communication relays. Then the images changed, showing the same structures with hidden weapons systems and military equipment. "For the past 15 years, while publicly reducing our military, we've been integrating advanced defense systems into civilian infrastructure. Every major transport ship has hidden weapons. Every space station has military-grade shields. We have stealth vessels positioned throughout human space." The room was silent as the council took this in. "You've been preparing for war while we've been promoting peace," the Luna representative finally asked. Linda stood up. "We've been promoting peace while preparing for those who don't want it, like the Arcturians." She walked around the table slowly. "I believe in peace. I believe in healing. That's why we built the Compassion and ships like her. But I also swore to protect Earth and its people." She stopped behind James's chair. "Admiral, how quickly can Protocol Omega be implemented?" 24 hours, Madam President." Linda looked around the table. "I am calling for a vote. The activation of Protocol Omega would be a declaration of war against the Arcturian Empire." One by one, the council members voted. For the first time in 50 years, the vote was unanimous. "Protocol Omega is approved," Linda said quietly. "God help the Arcturians. They'll get no mercy from us." Across the solar system, the hidden defense network came to life. On Mars, what looked like a cargo depot opened to reveal a fleet of warships. In the asteroid belt, mining platforms transformed into weapons platforms. Near Jupiter, research stations became military command centers. On the frontier military base called Hephaestus, Colonel Robert Mills received sealed orders. He was a stocky man with a hard face and steady hands. His unit, the 1st Retribution Fleet, had trained for years for this moment. He gathered his officers in the secure briefing room. The men and women who entered were the best fighters Earth had, though none had ever fought in a real war. "Today," Robert began, "we received word that the hospital ship Compassion was destroyed by Arcturian forces." Angry mutters filled the room. Many had friends on that ship. "Protocol Omega has been activated," Robert continued, and the room went silent. "For those who don't know, that means we are now at war." He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above the table, showing the Arcturian home system. "Our mission is to enter Arcturian space undetected and prepare for a coordinated strike. We will disable their defense systems, their military bases, and their fleet." "Sir," said a young officer, "are we talking about total war?" Robert's face was grim. "They attacked a hospital ship. They killed doctors, nurses, and patients. They fired on escape pods. What do you think?" He looked around at his officers. "Earth has been peaceful for so long that the galaxy has forgotten what we're capable of. The Arcturians think we're weak because we choose to heal rather than hurt. They're about to learn how wrong they are." At the same time, military analyst Greg Thompson sat in front of multiple screens aboard Earth's lead dreadnought, the Nemesis. The ship was massive, 5 times larger than any vessel Earth had publicly acknowledged building. Greg was younger than most of the senior staff, with quick eyes and a mind that could process vast amounts of data. For years, he had analyzed every piece of information about Arcturian defenses. Their weakness is here, he said, pointing to a spot on the holographic map. Their central command relies on 6 communication hubs. If we take those out simultaneously, their defense network will be blind for at least 10 minutes. Admiral James nodded. And their fleet? Spread thin. They don't expect an attack at home. They think their borders are their vulnerable points. What about civilian populations? Greg pulled up another map. We can target military installations with minimal civilian casualties, but it will limit our options. James studied the map. We're not them. We don't target civilians. Find a way. As ships across the solar system prepared for war, President Linda addressed the people of Earth. Billions watched as she stood at her podium, her face solemn. Today, we lost the hospital ship Compassion to an unprovoked attack by Arcturian forces. This was not just an attack on a ship. It was an attack on everything we stand for. Healing, peace, cooperation. Her voice grew stronger. Make no mistake, Earth will respond, and our response will be remembered for generations to come. In space, the human fleet gathered, weapons ready, crews determined. The message to the galaxy would be clear. They attacked a hospital ship. Earth would answer with complete obliteration. Commander Drall stood tall on the bridge of his ship as it entered Arcturian space. Around him, his crew worked quietly, some stealing glances at the officer's body that had been removed from the bridge only hours before. No one spoke about Officer Tech or his objections to attacking the hospital ship. Send a message to High Command, Drall ordered. The human vessel has been eliminated. No witnesses remain. His communications officer nodded. Yes, Commander. Shall I include the details about targeting escape pods? Drall considered this. No. Simply state the mission was a complete success. As the Vengeance and the other ships moved deeper into Arcturian territory, Drall allowed himself to feel satisfied. The humans would never know who attacked their precious hospital ship. By the time they figured it out, if they ever did, the diplomatic damage would be minimal. He had saved his people from the shame of accepting human help and removed a human presence from this sector of space. High Command would be pleased. Commander, his second-in-command said, approaching with a tablet. The victory celebration is being prepared. High Command has requested your presence as soon as we dock. Drall nodded. Good. It's about time my service was properly recognized. What Drall didn't know was that 50 stealth vessels were already moving through Arcturian space, completely undetected by Arcturian sensors. These ships had no markings, sent no signals, and left no trace of their passage. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a city. Aboard the lead stealth ship, Colonel Robert Mills studied his final orders. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were hard as stone. All ships report ready, Colonel, said his second-in-command. Robert nodded. Begin Operation Retribution. Phase 1. Across Arcturian space, the stealth vessels moved into position. They surrounded military outposts, defense platforms, and communication centers. They did all this without firing a single shot, without alerting a single sensor. On the planet Proxima VI, the largest Arcturian military base outside their home system stood proud against a purple sky. Inside the command center, General Crab reviewed reports with satisfaction. News of the successful destruction of the human hospital ship had arrived hours ago. The humans are too soft, he told his officers. They will send angry messages and call for meetings, but they won't fight. They'd forgotten how. A young officer looked up from her console. Sir, we've lost contact with Outpost Delta. Crab frowned. Check the communication array. All systems show green, sir. They're just not responding. Before Crab could reply, another officer spoke up. Sir, the lunar monitoring station is also not responding. Crab felt a chill. One outpost could be a technical problem. Two was something else. Put the base on alert level 2. Send scouts to both locations. But the scouts would never arrive. Outside the atmosphere, Robert's stealth ships launched their first attack. Specialized electromagnetic pulses hit the base, shutting down every electronic system. No alarms sounded. No warnings flashed. Everything simply went dark. General Krav stood in his suddenly silent command center, emergency lights casting red shadows on shocked faces. "What's happening?" he demanded. No one had an answer, and no one ever would. Across Arcturian space, the pattern repeated. One by one, military installations went silent. Defense platforms stopped transmitting. Monitoring stations ceased all functions. Each shutdown was precise, coordinated, and complete. On the Arcturian homeworld, Commander Drall stood before the High Command, accepting medals for his decisive action to protect Arcturian interests. The room was filled with military leaders, all congratulating themselves on their clever strategy. "The humans will never know what happened to their ship," said High Admiral Vex, the most senior Arcturian military leader. "And even if they suspect, they can prove nothing." Drall bowed his head in respect. "The mission was carried out exactly as ordered, High Admiral." "And the escape pods?" asked another commander. "No survivors." "None," Drall confirmed. "We were thorough." The celebration continued, with speeches about Arcturian strength and human weakness. None of them knew that at that very moment, Earth's response was already in motion. In orbit around the Arcturian homeworld, their pride, a ring of 50 defense platforms equipped with the most powerful weapons in their arsenal, stood guard. For generations, these platforms had protected the planet from any threat. No enemy fleet could approach without facing destruction. On Platform 1, Commander Thex supervised the night shift. It was usually the quietest time, with most of the crew resting. "Commander," called a sensor operator, "I'm picking up some strange readings." Thex walked over. "What kind of readings?" "I'm not sure. There's a shadow on the far edge of our sensor range. It's there one moment, gone the next." Thex studied the screen. "Run a diagnostic. These sensors are old." The operator nodded, but before he could start the diagnostic, the entire platform went dark. Every system shut down simultaneously. Across the defensive ring, all 50 platforms experienced the same total shutdown. In less than 60 seconds, the entire defense network protecting the Arcturian homeworld was blind and helpless. On the planet's surface, the celebration continued, unaware. Aboard the Earth dreadnought Nemesis, now visible in Arcturian space, Admiral James Walker stood on the bridge. Around him, officers worked with quiet efficiency, their faces showing no emotion despite the enormity of what they were doing. "All Arcturian defense systems neutralized," reported Greg Thompson from his station. "Their fleet is scattered. Their command structure is in chaos." James nodded. "Begin Phase 2. In high orbit above the Arcturian homeworld, hundreds of Earth warships appeared, dropping their stealth shields all at once. Their sudden appearance was like a magic trick. One moment empty space, the next a fleet of warships larger than anything the Arcturians had ever seen. In the high command chamber, alarms finally began to sound. Confused officers rushed to communication panels that no longer worked. High Admiral Vex demanded reports that no one could provide. Commander Drall stood frozen, his medal suddenly heavy on his chest. "Impossible," he whispered. "They couldn't have responded so quickly. They couldn't have penetrated our defenses." A massive view screen on the wall flickered to life, though no one had activated it. The face of Admiral James Walker filled the screen, his eyes cold. "People of Arcturus," he said, his voice echoing through not just the high command chamber, but every communication device on the planet. "I am Admiral Walker of Earth. 24 hours ago, your forces destroyed our hospital ship, the Compassion. You killed our doctors, our nurses, our patients. You fired on escape pods filled with the wounded and the healers. The room was completely silent now, every Arcturian staring at the human's face. "You attack those who heal," James continued. "We are not them." The screen changed to show the Earth fleet in orbit. It was massive, stretching as far as the eye could see. "Your military installations have been neutralized. Your defense platforms are disabled. Your fleets are scattered and cut off. You are completely at our mercy." James's voice was calm, which somehow made his words more terrifying. "And you will find that we have none to give." The first strikes hit Arcturian military bases across the planet, precise and devastating. There was no warning, no chance to evacuate or respond. Where proud Arcturian military structures had stood, only smoking craters remained. In the high command chamber, Commander Droll watched in horror as everything he believed about human weakness crumbled before his eyes. "What have we done?" he whispered as the Earth fleet unleashed its fury on those who had dared to attack a ship of healing. The Arcturian capital city burned, not with wild, uncontrolled fire, but with precise, targeted destruction. Earth ships hung in the sky like angry gods, their weapons striking only military targets with surgical precision. Commander Droll watched from the window of the High Command building as another missile hit the military academy across the city. The building collapsed in on itself, sending up a cloud of dust. No civilian structures around it were touched. "They could destroy us all," he said quietly. "Why don't they?" High Admiral Vex stood beside him, his proud posture now bent with the weight of defeat. "Because they are making a point. They are showing us, and the galaxy, that they choose who lives and who dies." On the Nemesis, Admiral James Walker watched the same scene from orbit. Beside him, Greg Thompson monitored the operation. "All military targets hit with 97% accuracy," Greg reported. "Civilian casualties below 1%. James nodded. "Status of their fleet: disabled but not destroyed. As ordered." Earth forces had systematically powered down Arcturian warships rather than blowing them apart. Crews were left alive in ships that could no longer move or fight. They could only watch as their world's defenses crumbled. "Begin Phase 3, James ordered. Across Arcturian territory, Earth forces landed on planets and moons. They didn't come as conquering armies, but as small, precise teams with specific targets. Government buildings, military bases, weapons factories. One by one, these symbols of Arcturian power were neutralized. On the Arcturian homeworld, Colonel Robert Mills led a team directly to the High Command building. They moved through the streets with purpose, ignoring the frightened civilians who watched from windows and doorways. The guards at the entrance to High Command raised their weapons, but quickly lowered them again. There was no point in fighting. The battle was already lost. Robert and his team walked unchallenged through the grand hallways until they reached the main chamber. Inside, the highest leaders of the Arcturian military stood in silence, waiting. By order of Earth United Government, Robert announced, his voice echoing in the large room, "The following individuals are under arrest for war crimes against humanity." He read from a tablet: High Admiral Vex, Fleet Commander Jorax, General Krav. The list continued, naming 13 high-ranking officers. When he said Commander Droll, there was a small reaction among the Arcturians. Some looked at Droll with hatred. Others looked away. "You will be transported to Earth to stand trial before the Galactic Council," Robert continued. "The charges are attacking a clearly marked hospital ship, targeting medical personnel, and firing on unarmed escape pods." Droll stepped forward. "We were following orders. I was following orders." Robert's face showed nothing. "So was I, when I destroyed your military. The difference is, my orders didn't include killing doctors and patients." 6 weeks later, President Linda Marshall stood before the Galactic Council. Representatives from 32 spacefaring species sat in a great circle, their faces solemn as Linda presented Earth's case. "We do not apologize for our response," she said firmly. "The attack on our hospital ship was not just an attack on humans. It was an attack on the very idea that there should be safe places even in war. It was an attack on healing itself. The large screen behind her showed images of the UNHS Compassion before its destruction. Medical staff of many species working together, patients being treated regardless of their origin. We could have destroyed the entire Arcturian civilization. Linda continued. We had the power. We had the justification. Instead, we chose precision. We removed those responsible while sparing the innocent. The council members murmured among themselves. Many had been shocked by both the Arcturian attack and Earth's overwhelming response. The human shows surprising restraint, said the representative from the Centaurid worlds. Or surprising power, replied the representative from Rigel. They hid their military strength for years while pretending to focus on peace. Linda held up her hand. We did not pretend to focus on peace. We genuinely believe in peace. That's why we built hospital ships instead of warships. But we are not fools. We prepared for those who might mistake our compassion for weakness. She gestured to the screen, which now showed the Arcturian leaders in custody. These individuals will face justice for their crimes. But Earth does not seek vengeance against all Arcturians. 3 months later, a new ship left Earth's orbital shipyard. Twice the size of the Compassion, the UNHS Remembrance gleamed white against the blackness of space, its red crosses clearly visible from every angle. 4 battle cruisers surrounded it, their weapons obvious and ready. On the observation deck, Dr. Thomas Reed stood looking out at the stars. He was one of only 12 survivors from the Compassion, pulled from a damaged escape pod by a passing trader ship. His face was thinner now, marked by what he had seen, but his eyes were still kind. Beside him stood the new captain, Jane Harris. She had been promoted to admiral after the destruction of the Compassion, but had asked to return to captain this new hospital ship instead. It feels strange, Thomas said quietly. Going back out there after everything that happened. Jane nodded. But necessary. We can't let fear stop us from helping others. At least we have protection this time, Thomas said, glancing at the battle cruisers visible through the window. Yes, Jane agreed. The galaxy now understands that our mercy is a choice, not a weakness. The door to the observation deck opened, and a small group entered. They were Arcturians, the first delegation from their new civilian government. The old military leadership had been removed entirely, partly by Earth's attack and partly by the Arcturians themselves, who had risen up against those who brought such disaster to their worlds. The lead Arcturian stepped forward nervously. Unlike Commander Drall, who had been proud and tall, this one seemed humble. I am Representative Kelv of the new Arcturian Council, he said. We come seeking both medical assistance for our people and forgiveness for what was done in our name. Jane studied him for a moment. We will treat your sick, she said finally. But never forget, humanity extends compassion not from weakness, but from strength. We choose healing first, but we are capable of much more. Kel bowed his head. The galaxy will not forget this lesson. As the Remembrance prepared for its first mission, the story of the Compassion and Earth's response spread across the stars. Species that had dismissed humans as naive idealists reassessed their understanding. The hospital ship had revealed something that would echo through galactic relations for centuries. Earth's mercy was a choice, and woe to those who mistake it for vulnerability. In a detention center on Earth, Commander Drall sat alone in his cell. His trial was over, his punishment decided. He would spend the rest of his life in this small room, with only his thoughts for company. Every day, he remembered the moment he gave the order to fire on the hospital ship. Every night, he dreamed of escape pods exploding in silence. And always, he heard Admiral Walker's words, "You attacked those who heal. We are not them." The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. They were not weak because they chose to heal. They were strong enough that they could afford to be merciful. Until someone mistook that mercy for weakness. Then, as the Arcturians had discovered, Earth's answer was complete obliteration.